The studio lights burned bright, painting the stage in soft gold and white. Cameras turned, microphones glowed red, and hundreds of eyes waited for the evening's most anticipated moment. The host smiled, his words sharp and smooth like a blade hidden inside velvet. Beside him sat Keanu Reeves, calm as ever, his eyes reflecting both kindness and distance. He had done hundreds of interviews before, but something about tonight felt different. The air in the room was too perfect, too polished, too expectant. Behind the stage curtain, assistants whispered instructions. Cue cards flipped, and the teleprompter scrolled with questions approved by the network. But no one knew that one question had been changed at the last minute. The host wanted something viral. He wanted controversy, not conversation. As the music faded, applause filled the air. The host leaned forward, smiling for the cameras, his voice smooth and confident. "Keanu, people call you the nicest man in Hollywood. But isn't that just an image?" The crowd laughed lightly. Keanu smiled politely. "I don't think about that," he said softly. "I just try to do good work." The host continued, pressing harder. "Come on, you must get tired of pretending to be humble. I mean, no one can be that good all the time." Keanu's smile stayed, but his hands tightened slightly on his knee. The crowd didn't notice. Sandra Bullock, sitting quietly among the audience for moral support, watched closely. She knew him well enough to see the shift in his eyes, calm turning into quiet discomfort. The host chuckled again, pretending friendliness. "Let's talk about loss. Your friend Paul, some say you use his name to stay relevant. Is that fair?" The studio went silent. Even the air seemed to stop moving. Keanu blinked once, slowly, his eyes soft yet distant. Sandra's hands curled into fists on her lap. He looked at the host and spoke in a calm voice. That's not something to joke about, but the host didn't stop. He wanted a reaction. He wanted something explosive. "Oh, come on, it's part of your story, isn't it?" Pain sells. Something broke in that moment. Not anger, but a line of dignity that had been crossed. Keanu didn't raise his voice. He simply removed the small microphone from his jacket, placed it on the chair, and stood up. His movements were slow, controlled, respectful. The audience gasped as he walked away from the bright lights, down the narrow aisle, and out through the studio doors. The cameras tried to follow him, but the director shouted to cut the feed. "We lost him," someone whispered behind the scenes. Within minutes, the internet exploded. Clips of Keanu walking out went viral. Hashtags spread across every platform. Headlines screamed, "Keanu Reeves storms out of live show." The host smiled privately. Controversy meant ratings, but Sandra knew better. She stood quietly at the side exit, watching as Keanu walked into the dark street, the city lights reflecting on wet pavement. He didn't look angry. He looked thoughtful, like a man who had heard enough noise and wanted silence. She followed him outside, her heels tapping softly on the ground. "Keanu," she called gently. He turned, his expression calm but heavy with meaning. "I didn't want to disrespect anyone," he said. "But there are moments when silence is the only answer." Sandra nodded, her eyes full of understanding. "They'll twist this," she warned. "They already are," he replied. "But I can't sit there while someone turns pain into entertainment." He looked down the street, where the sound of distant sirens faded into the night. "There's something else I need to do tonight." "What is it?" she asked softly. He didn't answer. He simply smiled faintly and walked away into the glow of the streetlights, his figure disappearing slowly into the night. That was the last anyone saw of him for hours. Reporters called his agent, fans posted theories, and social media burned with questions. Where had he gone? What was he doing? The next morning, Sandra woke to a flood of notifications. Headlines shouted about a meltdown, about arrogance, about disrespect. But one message stood out, a private one from a hospital nurse she once met during a charity event. It said, "Sandra, you might want to see this. A man who looks like Keanu came here last night. He read stories to the kids. He stayed for hours. He didn't want anyone to know his name." Sandra stared at the screen for a long time. Her heart softened as she whispered, "Of course he did." She grabbed her coat and left her hotel, heading toward the small children's hospital on the east side of the city. Outside, the sun was rising, painting the world in warm orange and gold. She didn't call the press. She didn't tell anyone. She simply followed her instinct, knowing that where kindness went, Keanu was never far behind. Inside that quiet hospital room, something extraordinary was waiting, something that would soon change how the whole world saw him again. The children's hospital stood at the edge of the city, a quiet place surrounded by trees and soft morning light. It was a world far away from the noise of cameras and headlines. The scent of disinfectant mixed with faint traces of crayons and warm soup drifting from the cafeteria. It was the kind of place where pain and hope lived side by side. Sandra arrived at the entrance just as the nurses began their morning rounds. She wore a simple hoodie and glasses, keeping her head low. She didn't want to attract attention. Her mind kept replaying the nurse's message. Keanu, after walking out of that tense interview, had come here, of all places. Why? She approached the front desk gently. Hi, she said softly. I'm here to see Nurse Clara. She sent me a message. The receptionist nodded. You're Miss Bullock, right? She's waiting for you in Ward 5. As Sandra walked down the hallway, she could hear faint laughter echoing from a room at the far end. It was the sound of children laughing, pure, light, and full of life. She stopped for a moment, realizing how rare that sound was in such a place. Nurse Clara met her near the doorway. Her eyes were tired but kind. You came, she said quietly. He's really here? Sandra asked. Clara smiled and nodded. He came last night. He didn't tell us who he was, just asked if he could spend time with the kids. He read stories, helped fix our broken VR headset, and told them funny little jokes. We didn't even recognize him at first. Sandra stepped closer, peeking into the room. There he was. Keanu sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by a small group of children in hospital gowns. He was reading a story from an old book, his voice soft and full of calm warmth. A little girl leaned on his shoulder, eyes half closed from medicine, but smiling. He wasn't acting. He wasn't performing. He was simply there, present in the most human way possible. Sandra watched quietly, her heart swelling. She remembered the angry headlines, the cruel words online calling him unprofessional. Yet here he was, bringing peace to children who needed hope far more than the world needed gossip. The story ended, and the kids clapped weakly but cheerfully. Keanu smiled and handed each of them a small wooden charm shaped like a star. This is for you, he said softly. It's a wish star. Every time you hold it, think about something kind you can do for someone else. A boy with a bald head looked up at him and asked, Who are you, mister? Keanu smiled again, that same quiet smile the world loved. Just someone who believes in good stories. Sandra couldn't hold back anymore. She stepped into the room, smiling gently. Those were beautiful words, she said. Keanu looked up, surprised but calm. Sandra, he said softly, standing up. The children's faces lit up when they recognized her. It's her! One girl whispered excitedly. Sandra knelt beside them, waving playfully. Hi there, she said. I heard someone special came to visit. Keanu smiled faintly. They're the special ones, he said. I just followed the laughter. The nurses let them talk for a while. Sandra waited until the kids were taken to lunch before she spoke privately to him. You know the world thinks you had a breakdown, she said quietly. Keanu leaned against the wall, hands in his pockets. That's fine. They can think what they want. I didn't walk out because of anger, Sandra. I walked out because some words should never be said for entertainment. She nodded slowly. You didn't just leave the stage, Keanu. You walked straight into something real. He looked down the hallway where the children's laughter echoed faintly. They remind me that kindness isn't about timing. It's about presence. No cameras, no applause, no spotlight. Just being there. Sandra noticed his voice tremble slightly, though he kept his calm tone. You've been here before, haven't you? She asked. Keanu hesitated for a second. Years ago, he said finally. I used to visit late at night. I met a boy named Eli. He loved building things. He wanted to create a machine that could make stars appear on the ceiling for kids who couldn't see the night sky. He didn't make it. He passed away before he could finish. Sandra listened quietly, feeling the weight in his words. Did you finish it for him? He smiled softly. Maybe one day. I never forgot his dream. They sat together in silence, the sound of the hospital around them, a lullaby of machines, footsteps, and soft voices. It wasn't fame or power that filled the air. It was humanity. As they left the ward, a young intern named Mia approached nervously, holding a tablet. She had been working the night shift when Keanu first arrived. "Mr. Reeves," she said softly, "I'm sorry, but someone might have taken a short video of you last night. They didn't show your face, just your hands fixing the headset and the kids laughing. It's spreading online. People are calling you the silent hero." Keanu paused. His expression remained calm, though his eyes dimmed slightly. "Did the children's faces show?" "No," she said quickly. "Only your hands and voice." He sighed in relief. "Then that's fine. As long as it's about them, not me." But deep down, Sandra knew that the world would soon find out who that silent hero really was. And when they did, everything would change again. Only this time, not with anger or controversy, but with something far more powerful. As they stepped outside into the soft daylight, Sandra turned to him. "You can't hide kindness forever," she said with a gentle smile. Keanu looked toward the sky. "Maybe not, but maybe it's enough if kindness hides where it's needed most." The wind carried their silence through the hospital garden, where flowers swayed quietly. Somewhere inside, a child whispered a wish to their wooden star. And for the first time since that chaotic night, Keanu smiled. Not for cameras, not for fame, but for peace. He didn't know it yet. But the quiet act that started in that small hospital room was about to echo far beyond anything he imagined. The next morning, the world woke up to chaos again. The clip of the silent hero had spread faster than anyone expected. Millions of people had watched it overnight. It showed a man sitting on the floor of a children's hospital, surrounded by laughter and soft music. His face was hidden, but his calm voice, reading a bedtime story, had touched everyone's heart. Comments flooded social media. "Whoever he is, he's a real angel. That voice sounds familiar. Is this Keanu Reeves?" Reporters began chasing clues, matching his gestures, tone, and even the shape of his hands. Within hours, the truth surfaced. The anonymous man was Keanu Reeves. Some fans cried, some smiled, and others felt deep respect. But the media didn't stay silent for long. Every news outlet wanted the exclusive. Every channel wanted to turn his quiet act into a story. The same host who had insulted him on live television now sat in front of cameras pretending concern. "Keanu Reeves disappeared right after our show," he said with practiced sadness. "But it seems he went on to do something truly kind. Perhaps we misunderstood him." Behind the screen, Sandra watched the broadcast with a quiet sigh. She knew the host wasn't sorry. He was chasing redemption through Keanu's kindness. Meanwhile, Keanu stayed hidden in a small cafe near the hospital. He wore a simple jacket and cap, sipping coffee slowly as he looked out the window. The streets outside were wet from early rain, and life moved as it always did, quietly, imperfectly, beautifully. Sandra found him there. She sat opposite him without a word. They shared a silence that only old friends could understand. "Finally," she said, "you're trending again. Not for a movie, not for a scandal. For kindness." Keanu gave a soft, almost amused smile. "I didn't do it for that. I just wanted to remind myself what really matters. The world needed that reminder too," she replied. "But they'll keep talking until you say something. Will you?" He shook his head. "Talking doesn't always heal. Sometimes listening does." Before she could reply, the cafe door opened and a young man entered, holding a camera. He froze when he saw Keanu, his eyes wide. "It is you," he said in disbelief. "Sir, I'm from local news. Can I ask? Why did you walk out of the interview?" Keanu looked at him gently, because sometimes the right words don't come from questions. They come from silence. The man hesitated, then lowered his camera. "People think you were angry." "No," Keanu said softly. "I wasn't angry. I was protecting something sacred. Respect." The young reporter stood there for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Thank you, sir," he whispered before walking away without taking a single picture. Sandra smiled faintly. "You even teach journalists without saying much," she said. Keanu chuckled. "They just need to remember that truth doesn't need a headline. It needs heart." Later that afternoon, he and Sandra returned to the hospital. The staff greeted them with smiles and quiet gratitude. The children had made a handmade card with drawings of stars and hearts. On it they had written, "Thank you for the stories, Mr. Keanu." He knelt beside them, his eyes warm. "I should be thanking you," he said softly. "You reminded me what light looks like." But even as he smiled, Nurse Clara came in with a serious expression. "Keanu," she said quietly, "the hospital board wants to speak with you. There's something you should know." They walked down the hall to a small office. The director of the hospital greeted him kindly. "Mr. Reeves, I want to thank you for your generosity," he said. "You've been supporting this hospital for many years under the name K. Reeves Foundation. Your funds built our children's therapy wing and paid for dozens of treatments." Keanu frowned in surprise. "How did you know that was me?" The director smiled. "We didn't until last night. Your old donation record matched the details you used to fix our equipment. The children recognized your voice from the stories. It all connected," Keanu sighed softly. "I never wanted anyone to know. This place helped me once. I just wanted to give something back." Sandra listened quietly, her eyes glistening. She knew that behind his quiet generosity was a deeper story, a personal loss that shaped his compassion. "You don't owe anyone an explanation," the director said kindly. "But you should know something else. The host who insulted you, his child is one of our patients. She was here last night. She's the one who gave you the drawing of the wish star." The words hung in the air like a silent thunder. Keanu froze, his breath catching. "His child?" "Yes," the director nodded. "He doesn't talk about it publicly. She's recovering from a long illness. She adores you. She said you made her laugh for the first time in weeks." Keanu closed his eyes, his mind spinning. Everything suddenly connected: the disrespect, the pain, the misunderstanding. The man who had mocked him for using tragedy had been carrying his own quiet suffering. Sandra placed a hand on his arm. "What will you do?" He looked at her for a long moment, then said quietly, "I need to go back." "To the show?" she asked, surprised. "Yes," he replied softly, "not to defend myself, but to remind him, and everyone, what kindness really means." The next evening, news spread that Keanu Reeves would return to the same talk show. The announcement broke the internet. Fans expected anger, confrontation, maybe even revenge. But Keanu's friends knew better. He didn't fight fire with fire. He used light. As the studio prepared again, the host waited nervously behind his desk, unsure what to expect. Cameras were ready. Lights burned bright once more. But this time, the air felt different. Heavier, quieter, full of unfinished words waiting to be spoken. And when Keanu walked in, the entire room fell silent. The studio was packed again. The same bright lights, the same red cameras, but the air felt heavier this time. Reporters filled every seat. Fans waited outside the building, and the entire world was ready to see what Keanu Reeves would say. Everyone expected drama, anger, or tears. No one expected silence to be his greatest weapon again. The host sat behind the desk, nervously adjusting his tie. He had replayed the last interview in his mind 100 times, and the guilt had started to grow inside him. He knew he had crossed a line, but he didn't know how to undo it. When he saw Keanu walking toward him again, dressed simply in a black shirt and jeans, his throat went dry. The audience rose in applause, but Keanu simply lifted a hand gently, signaling them to sit. He didn't want celebration. He wanted understanding. The host forced a shaky smile. "Mr. Reeves," he began, "thank you for coming back. I didn't expect—" Keanu interrupted softly. "I didn't come back to argue." The audience leaned forward. The silence was sharp enough to cut through the tension. Keanu took his seat slowly. "I came back because sometimes silence can be misunderstood. And sometimes respect deserves a voice." The host looked down, guilt flickering across his face. "I said things I shouldn't have," he admitted. "I crossed boundaries. I was chasing ratings, not truth." Keanu nodded. "We all make mistakes. Pain makes people act differently. Sometimes the loudest voices are the ones hiding the deepest hurt." The host looked up, surprised. "Why are you being kind to me after everything I said?" Keanu leaned forward slightly, his tone calm and steady. "Because kindness isn't a reaction. It's a choice." There was a pause, long and powerful. The audience didn't move. Even the crew forgot to breathe. Keanu continued, I learned something recently. When I walked out of this stage, I walked into a children's hospital. I met a little girl who gave me a wooden star. She told me it was a wish for her father, to be happy again. I didn't know who she was then, but now I do. The host's eyes widened. His lips trembled. My daughter, he whispered. Keanu nodded gently. Yes, she's strong. She laughed that night. She made everyone smile. I didn't know she was your child, but she reminded me that sometimes the people who hurt us are also hurting quietly. The entire room fell silent. The host covered his mouth, holding back tears. I didn't mean to disrespect you, he said in a broken voice. I didn't know how to face my own pain. Keanu's eyes softened. You don't owe me an apology, he said. You owe yourself forgiveness. There was a long pause. The cameras kept rolling, capturing a moment that wasn't scripted, rehearsed, or polished. It was real. The host slowly stood up. The world sees you as a star, he said softly. But tonight you showed me what it means to be human. Keanu stood too, extending his hand. The host hesitated for a moment before shaking it firmly. The audience rose to their feet, not clapping wildly, but quietly, respectfully, like they were witnessing something sacred. Then, Keanu turned toward the camera. His voice was calm but filled with quiet strength. To everyone watching, he said, the world doesn't need more noise. It needs listening. It doesn't need more fame. It needs faith, in kindness, in respect, in each other. We're all carrying something invisible. So maybe, before judging someone, pause long enough to see what they're hiding behind their silence. The lights softened. Even the cameramen looked emotional. Sandra Bullock, sitting near the side of the stage, wiped a tear quietly. She had seen Keanu act in dozens of roles, but never had he spoken with such truth. After the show ended, the host stayed seated, unable to move. Keanu placed a small envelope on the desk before walking away. When the cameras went dark, the host opened the envelope. Inside was a simple handwritten note. It said, The children's therapy room needs new equipment. I already arranged the funds. Please visit her tomorrow. She misses your voice more than any interview ever could. The host closed his eyes, tears finally falling. He had humiliated a man who had secretly helped his own child heal. Outside, Keanu walked through the night breeze with Sandra beside him. She didn't speak for a while, just walked quietly, matching his pace. Finally, she said softly, You changed more than a headline tonight. You changed a heart? Keanu smiled faintly. He already had a heart, he said. He just forgot to use it. They reached the same street where he had walked out days ago. This time the lights didn't blind him. The noise didn't follow. It was peaceful. But the story wasn't over yet, because what happened next would turn his simple act of kindness into something far greater, a global movement that would touch millions. The next morning, the world woke up to something rare on the internet, silence that felt like respect. No gossip, no arguments, no mocking headlines. The video of Keanu's calm words from the night before spread across every platform. But this time, the tone was different. People weren't arguing. They were reflecting. Clips of him saying, kindness isn't a reaction, it's a choice, were replayed millions of times. Teachers discussed it with students. Parents shared it with their children. Even journalists who once criticized him now wrote about empathy and accountability. The story had shifted from drama to dignity. In schools, kids drew stars on paper with the words, be kind first. Some placed them on classroom walls. One teacher tweeted a picture of it with the caption, My students learned from Keanu today. Fame fades, but kindness echoes. Sandra watched all of it from her living room that morning. Sunlight poured through her window and she couldn't help but smile. She had always known Keanu as humble and gentle, but seeing the world respond this way made her emotional. It was like watching a quiet spark turn into a wildfire of goodness. Her phone buzzed, a message from Keanu. Heading to the hospital. Want to come? She replied instantly. Of course. When they arrived, the hospital garden was filled with people, reporters, families, and children holding small paper stars. Nurse Clara greeted them, her eyes wet with emotion. You've started something beautiful, she said softly. Keanu smiled. I didn't start anything. The children did. As they walked through the hallways, the laughter of kids filled the air again. The little girl, the host's daughter, ran toward Keanu, holding the same wooden star he had given her. "You came back," she said happily. He knelt down and smiled. "Of course. You still have your star?" She nodded proudly. "I made more for other kids. I told them when you hold it, you think of someone you want to be kind to." Keanu's voice softened. "That's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard." The host appeared behind her, holding a small bouquet of flowers. His eyes looked tired but peaceful. "She wanted to give these to you," he said quietly. Keanu stood, shaking his hand gently. "How is she doing?" "Better," the host said. "The doctors say her recovery is stronger than they expected." He paused, then added, "I came to thank you. Not for forgiving me, but for showing me how to forgive myself." Keanu placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then maybe the real story isn't about what happened on television," he said. "Maybe it's about what happened after." The host nodded, emotion tightening his voice. "The world doesn't often see this side of people, but now they will. I want to air the truth, not about what I said, but about what you did after." Keanu shook his head softly. "Don't air my name. Tell their story. Tell the world what these kids teach us every day. It's strength, hope, kindness. The rest doesn't matter." The host hesitated. "But they'll want to know it's you." "They already do," Sandra said gently. "And they've already learned what they needed." That evening, the network aired a special episode. No bright lights, no applause, no celebrity introductions. Just a quiet documentary called The Silent Hands. It showed clips from the children's hospital, the laughter of the patients, the volunteers, and a voiceover. Keanu's calm, gentle tone, speaking about unseen kindness. He said, "Sometimes the biggest difference we make is in moments no one records. A kind word, a patient ear, a helping hand. You never know which small act might save someone's day, or their life." The program ended with the image of hundreds of children holding small wooden stars. Under it, simple white text appeared, dedicated to every silent helper. When it aired, people across the world cried. Governments shared it in schools. Companies paused meetings to replay it. Kindness was trending again, not as a hashtag, but as a feeling. Later that night, Keanu and Sandra sat on a park bench overlooking the city. It was quiet, the streetlights glowing softly around them. "You realize what you've done, right?" Sandra said with a smile. Keanu shook his head. "I didn't do anything special." She looked at him, amused. "You reminded millions of people that being human is special." He chuckled. "It's strange, isn't it? I walked out of a room, and somehow it led to all this. Because you walked toward something better," she said softly. He looked up at the sky, where a few stars peeked through the city lights. "You know, when that little girl gave me her wooden star, I thought it was just a gift. But now I think it was something more. A reminder that light doesn't disappear. It just changes hands." Sandra smiled gently. "That should be your next quote, philosopher Keanu." He laughed quietly. "Nah, let's just call it life's echo." As they sat together, the wind carried the faint laughter of children from the hospital nearby. It mixed with the distant sound of the city, cars, footsteps, conversations. Ordinary life made softer by something extraordinary, but destiny wasn't finished yet. Because the next morning, a letter would arrive at Keanu's doorstep. A letter that revealed the final truth about the kindness he had unknowingly set in motion years ago. A truth that would leave even him speechless. The morning sunlight spilled through the blinds of Keanu's quiet apartment. Everything was still. No reporters, no noise, no calls. For the first time in days, peace had finally returned. He made a cup of coffee, sat by the window, and looked out at the calm city below. His heart felt lighter, as if something heavy had finally been set down. As he reached for the morning mail, he noticed an envelope lying apart from the rest. It was hand-delivered, sealed with a simple golden star sticker. There was no sender's name, just one short line written neatly across the front. For the man who never forgot. Keanu frowned slightly, curious. He tore it open carefully. Inside was a folded letter, written in a shaky but familiar handwriting. He began to read. Dear Mr. Reeves, I don't know if you remember me. My name is Eli. I was one of the children you visited years ago at St. Michael's Hospital. You told me stories when I couldn't sleep. You helped me fix my little machine that made lights on the ceiling. I called it the Dream Sky. You once promised you'd finish it if I couldn't. Keanu froze. Eli. The boy who had wanted to make stars appear for children who couldn't go outside. The boy whose dream he had never forgotten. He continued reading, his hands trembling slightly. I didn't survive long after you last visited, but my mom kept your promise alive. She used your donation to complete the Dream Sky for the hospital. It's now in every children's ward. Small lights that make stars on the ceiling so every child can fall asleep under their own sky. She wanted you to know it was your kindness that built it. You might not remember her, but you met her once. She was a nurse back then. The letter ended with one final line, written by another hand. Softer, neater, older. Thank you, Mr. Reeves. I'm Nurse Clara now. Eli was my son. Your kindness helped me heal long after he was gone. Every star you see in that ward shines because you kept your promise. For a long moment, Keanu just sat there, staring at the words. His eyes filled with tears that he didn't bother to hide. Everything came together. The hospital, the laughter, the wish stars, the small wooden charms he gave to children. Every act had come from something much deeper than even he realized. He stood slowly, looking out the window at the morning sun. The city was awake, but the world felt silent, the kind of silence that held meaning, not emptiness. Later that day, he went back to the hospital one last time. Nurse Clara met him at the entrance, holding another envelope. You read it, she said softly. He nodded, unable to speak. She smiled faintly. Eli used to say stars are promises that never stop shining. You kept his alive. She led him into a new ward, recently painted with bright colors and gentle lights. On the ceiling, 1,000 small stars glowed softly, creating the illusion of a night sky. Children lay in their beds looking up in wonder. Some pointed, some whispered wishes. One little boy looked at Keanu and asked, Did you make these stars? Keanu knelt beside him, smiling gently. No, he said softly. Someone kind did. I just helped them shine. The boy grinned. They make me feel safe. That's what stars are for, Keanu said. As he stood there, Sandra entered quietly behind him. She watched him with admiration and warmth. I knew you'd come back here, she said softly. It felt right, he replied. They stood together, watching the stars dance across the ceiling. The air was filled with calm, the kind that comes after a long storm. So this is where it all began, Sandra said. And where it ends, Keanu whispered. Or maybe where it starts again. They walked out into the courtyard, where sunlight filtered through the trees. Volunteers were setting up a small ceremony. The hospital was officially naming the new therapy wing the Dream Sky Center, dedicated to all who give kindness quietly. As they unveiled the sign, Keanu noticed something carved beneath the title. 4 small words. Fame fades, kindness echoes. He froze for a moment, his breath catching. He turned to Nurse Clara, who smiled through her tears. We used your words, she said. They belong here. The crowd applauded gently. Some children released paper stars into the air, each carrying a message of hope. One floated down and landed near Keanu's feet. He picked it up and read the tiny note written on it. Thank you for walking out. Sandra leaned close, whispering, You didn't walk out, Keanu. You walked into the hearts that needed you. He smiled quietly. Maybe that's what walking out really means, and leaving noise behind and finding meaning. As the ceremony ended, the sun began to set, bathing the hospital in a golden glow. The children's laughter echoed faintly in the background, mixing with the rustling of leaves and the soft hum of life continuing. Keanu looked up at the sky. For a moment, he imagined he could see Eli's dream lights among the real stars, shining, gentle, endless. He whispered softly, almost to himself. Thank you, little one. You taught me what real light looks like. Sandra smiled beside him, her voice tender. So what's next for the man who changed the world with silence? He looked at her and said with a calm smile, "The same thing as always. One small act of kindness at a time." As they walked away, the stars above seemed to glow a little brighter, and the laughter of children filled the night air like a song. The world had witnessed anger, misunderstanding, and judgment, but in the end, it remembered something far more powerful, that kindness never disappears. It only passes from one heart to another, lighting the way forward. And in that light, Keanu Reeves didn't just find peace, he became it.